Hey everyone, the Quickie reviews from Cannes Film Festival will be recorded soon, but first I wanted to talk about some movies that are still in theaters right now. One of them was Ma, which is probably the worst movie I've seen all year. I was certainly expecting it to be bad, but I had no idea it would be this bad. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering whether or not it's something you can watch as a so bad it's good comedy, and the answer is kind of. There were certainly a lot of very unintentionally funny moments, but for the most part it was just really awkward and embarrassing. This is one of the most unintentionally uncomfortable movies I've ever seen. The characters in this film are supposed to be around 16 years old, I guess. Octavia Spencer plays a woman who's just allowing these kids to drink in her basement so that they'll think she's super cool, but apparently she has ulterior motives. So many of the scenes revolve around these kids partying, and every single one of them you can just tell how uncomfortable each of these actors are on set. Woo, we're dancing! We're having a really fun time, can't you tell? We're so happy right now. It was super uncomfortable and embarrassing. One guy exhales after taking a puff of a joint, and the other guy's like, whoa, dude, that's so gangster, bro, and takes a picture of him. It is so fucking awkward, you have no idea. The interactions between the main character and her mother were also equally awkward. It's impossible to believe, even for a second, that these are real people having real conversations. Octavia Spencer didn't really do a bad job with her performance, but she didn't really do anything either. She's a great actor, but I was never really sold on her character. She was just kind of there. Now, obviously, with this being another Blumhouse movie, the budget was relatively low, but boy, did it ever particularly show in this film. First of all, everything looked like shit. There was nothing creative about the presentation, and it just felt really cheap. There were basically just 3 locations that they used the entire film. Every scene would take place at the school, the rock pile, or Ma's house. There were some brief exceptions, but seriously, those 3 locations took up like 90% of the movie. So as you can probably imagine, the experience of watching this film felt really stale. I wonder how much of the $5 million budget they blew on Octavia Spencer, because the production value of this film is nowhere to be found. There are a bunch of really annoying and pointless flashback scenes that take place decades earlier, and the costumes they used all looked so cheap and unprofessional. I never knew I could watch a movie and be this bothered by cheap wardrobe. The plot of this film is so predictable that I called the entire movie before it even started. Every single line and plot device is just so unbearably lazy and transparent. There's a scene that starts out with some random girl at school showing off her bracelet to the main character. Oh, look at this new bracelet I just got. My boyfriend gave it to me. Okay, bye-bye. This certainly won't come into play later. If there was any effort put into any aspect of this film, I would feel sorry for whoever admitted that. The film's score also sucked. Every song felt like a cheap second-rate imitation of whatever temp music the director told them to copy. Most of the acting was atrocious. There's a lispy gay stereotype character that's thrown into a few scenes but adds literally nothing to the film. His character doesn't do anything. He could be completely removed from the story and there would be no difference. I don't know why he was there. What's really weird about this movie is that the entire thing goes on without anything happening that's R-rated at all, and then they just throw it into the last 10 minutes of the film. Like, oh, some blood and gore now, I guess. Okay. Not really sure what they were going for, but by the end of the movie, it just felt really unfitting. There's quite a few frustrating moments in the film where you're wondering why characters don't do the simplest of things to get out of this bad situation. Oh no, she's gone missing. She has a phone. Why don't you call her? Oh no, I'm trapped in here and the situation's really dangerous. You have a phone. You have a fucking phone. Call someone. In most horror movies, they have some cliched excuse as to why their phone isn't working. Maybe it's no reception, or maybe it got broken. But in this film, they just forgot that the characters had phones, I guess. There's a point in the film where several of the characters are tied to the wall with a dog collar and leash, and their hands aren't restrained, so at any point they could just detach the leash from their collar. It wasn't locked. All they had to do was just figure it out. Oh no, I'm trapped here. Just unhook the fucking leash from your collar. There's a part in the movie where things are on fire, but the fire doesn't really produce any smoke, I guess. The fire is slowly creeping up the stairs to one of the characters, but they would have died from smoke inhalation a long time ago, but there was no smoke, really. So obviously, as shown in the trailer, she winds up sedating some of these kids and, I guess, mutilating them in ways. But one of the kids, she just decides to give him white face. movies. Just because. Anyway, this movie is a gigantic piece of shit. It's pretty boring and stale and repetitive and goes nowhere. It's incredibly awkward and uncomfortable, and there weren't really any redeemable qualities about this film whatsoever. Don't see it. It's really, really bad. And I'm giving this one a 1 out of 10. Another movie I saw in theaters was Brightburn, and it was pretty disappointing. Now, I was kind of excited for this movie based on the concept. Basically, it's like a Superman origin story, except if Superman were a dick. There's quite a bit you could do with this story, but unfortunately, it was presented in the most shallow and surface-level way possible. The film's biggest problem is that it didn't develop anything, and by no means would it have been a great film even if it did, but it certainly would have improved it by quite a lot. It feels like they skipped over the first 10 minutes of what should have been in this story, so every event that took place in this film felt so empty and meaningless. There was no context for anything that was happening. So basically, instead of this kid always being superpowered and evil since the moment he fell to Earth, we just skip to him at age 12 and something activates out of nowhere and all of a sudden he's like superpowered and evil, I guess. It's just a really arbitrary moment where it decides to kick in for no reason. But we don't know anything about him before this point. So when he starts acting like a sociopath, all I can think is, well, was he always a sociopath? Was he capable of emotion before this point? What was his relationship with his parents? Did he love his mother? Did he love his father? Did he love his aunt and uncle? He didn't really express anything the entire time. It's a really, really bad thing when you don't know anything about the main character of the film. There are plenty of films where the child characters are essentially just thrown in as props for the story, but very rarely do you see that with the main character. Every single action that this character performs just feels so meaningless. There is so much more you could do with this story if you just developed it a little. There was no foundation for any of the events that took place in the film, and with an hour-and-a-half runtime, they definitely could have fit something in there. I saw this movie directly after watching Ma, and obviously this is a much better film, although so is every other movie I've seen this year. But what upsets me about Brightburn is that there was some potential here. The film looked pretty great from a visual standpoint. It was well colored, well lit, and looked very professional. There was a lot of noticeable production value in this movie when it came to the filmmaking and special effects. The performances weren't bad for the most part, and Elizabeth Banks did a great job. Her character in particular was the most believable out of all of them. There were some fun, gory moments in the film too. But with this being a horror film, it's a little disappointing that one of its weakest elements were the scares. Every scare tactic found in this film was pulled right out of The Strangers. There's an overabundance of cheap jump scares, and every other moment of supposed tension is just from one of those shots where it's like, oh, he's here, and oh, he's not there now. Oh, you see, he's not there anymore. They even did that stupid mirror shot horror cliche. But the problem with presenting this character as some villain sneaking around, trying not to be seen, showing up and then disappearing and all that shit, is that he's so overpowered that he doesn't need to. What? I thought you wanted to take over the world. Nothing's stopping you. Why are you sneaking around? Just kill them. There's no reason for any of it. I want to take over the world in the most inefficient way possible. Once again, the fact that his relationships were never developed makes it impossible to relate to anything that happens. Was there some sort of affection that he showed for his family members at any point before this whole thing happened? He's clearly a sociopath now that doesn't give a shit about anybody. Why are you sneaking around killing people in a way where you can pretend you didn't? Especially if you're gonna leave that stupid tag symbol next to each of the bodies. Do you want people to know it was you? Why don't you just kill them without sneaking around? Anyway, this movie was an absolute waste of a decent concept. If this concept were given to some different writers, then it could have been a lot better. This is a very unfortunate case of wasted potential. Check this one out if you want, but personally, I would not recommend it, and I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10.